Today's project is a 1994 Ford Bronco. The day began as a brake bleed, but became a rear wheel cylinder change. Brake spring installation tools will make the job easier and can be purchased for less than $20. Flare nut tubing wrenches are used to disconnect brake lines to prevent rounding over the corners. "100 foot-pounds of torque and many years of sitting have made these lug nuts too much for this impact driver." To break them loose, I applied the brakes and pulled out a special tool I invented for working on Humvees. It's a T-handled breaker bar that takes on the toughest jobs with ease. If the brake drum won't pull free, remove the black oblong rubber plug from the back and rotate the star wheel with a brake spoon or a screwdriver to release the tension. Spring retainer cups are removed by pressing in and turning a quarter of a turn. A blanket or tarp placed underneath the brakes can prevent the loss of small hardware. There are 3 large springs that hold the brake shoes to the wheel cylinder and the brake adjuster. It's best to only work on one brake at a time because left and right parts are very similar but often not interchangeable, and the other side makes a good reference for installation. Disconnect the brake line with a flare nut tubing wrench, then disconnect the 2 mounting bolts from the wheel cylinder. Bleeder screws should be capped, especially rear bleeder screws, because the holes collect dirt from the rear wheels and cause them to seize and break. I disassembled the wheel cylinder to allow me to oil the bleeder screw from the inside. Disassembly consists of a spring, 2 pistons, and 2 rubber cup seals. Finger pressure is all that's needed to push them out. I applied tapping oil and seated the easy out and gave it a couple of twists. I thought I felt it breaking free. Easy out broke instead. An easy out is very hard, brittle steel and cannot be drilled with high-speed drill bits, so I used a brand new cobalt bit instead. I tried 2 drill bits with very little success, so I decided to go buy a new one for about $13. I clamped a pair of vice grips on the emergency brake cable and pulled it free. When installing the wheel cylinder, screw the bolts in part way and leave it loose to allow easier alignment with the brake line. Extra care must be taken to prevent cross-threading the brake line during installation. Always start the brake line by hand first before applying a wrench. I thoroughly cleaned all the parts with alcohol to remove the brake dust and oily residue. Rust and corrosion was cleaned with a wire wheel mounted on a bench grinder. I use vice grips to hold small parts securely to keep my hands clear and prevent them from being pulled into the wheel. With all the parts cleaned, I pre-assembled them on the workbench. One of the small pins was bent. I straightened it in a bench vise. I scrubbed the backing plate with alcohol so that I could lubricate the contact points. The friction surface must be clean of any contamination to prevent the brakes from slipping. High-temperature silicone grease is applied to these mounting pads to allow the shoes to perform properly. In the future, while removing the brake pad, I would clamp the vice grips on the cable, leaving a small gap. This could be easier with a second set of hands. Hold the small pin while you align the spring and cup and rotate it a quarter turn. Insert the spreader bar with the spring facing opposite where the cable attaches. Install the other shoe with the cup and spring. Attach the cable eyelet next, then install the spring on the opposite shoe. This spring tool has a detent on the back side. You grip the pin and then you rotate to release the spring. Install the cable fulcrum next. Insert the tail of the larger spring in the hole and rotate it. Needle nose are used to support the larger spring because of the compound tension of the other spring and the complexity trying to attach this to this crowded pin. Next, we'll install the self-adjustment mechanism. Insert the tab in the hole in the brake shoe and hook the cable. The star wheel of the self-adjuster faces the cable side. Attach the tail of the spring through the brake shoe. Loop the spring into the bracket using the same hole as the cable. Adjust the clearance of the brake shoes with the star wheel until the brake drum slides into position. Loosen the bleeder screw and attach a hose and begin to bleed the brakes from the passenger's rear wheel.